The fluorescent lights in courtroom 7B hummed with the kind of sterile indifference that Marcus Jefferson had perfected over 23 years on the bench. He sat elevated, draped in black robes that made him look more like a king than a public servant, watching the parade of defendants with the detached boredom of someone who'd already decided their fates before hearing a single word. "Next case," he drawled, not bothering to look up from his notes. "People versus Simone Williams, Your Honor." The bailiff's voice echoed through the half-empty courtroom. Simone Williams stood slowly, her hands trembling as she smoothed down the only professional outfit she owned, a navy blue dress bought from Goodwill 3 years ago for job interviews that never led anywhere. At 34, she looked both younger and older than her years. Younger in the hope that still flickered in her dark eyes, older in the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. Beside her sat Gerald Moss, a public defender who'd been assigned to her case 48 hours ago and had spent exactly 27 minutes reviewing the file. He didn't stand when she did. Didn't even look at her. In the gallery, 12-year-old Maya Williams sat with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. She wore her school uniform, white shirt, plaid skirt, sneakers that were 2 sizes too small but the only pair they could afford. Her thick braids were pulled back neatly, done by her mother that morning with shaking hands and whispered prayers. "Mrs. Williams," Judge Jefferson finally looked up, and Simone felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing, cold, assessing, already condemning. "You're charged with grand larceny, theft of $8,000 from your employer, Riverside Medical Supplies. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." Simone's voice cracked despite her effort to sound strong. "I didn't take that money. I would never. Save it for your statement." Jefferson waved his hand dismissively. "Mr. Carmichael, present your case." The prosecutor was everything Gerald Moss wasn't, polished, prepared, and performing for an audience that included his boss, the district attorney, sitting in the front row. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. Security footage shows Mrs. Williams accessing the supply room where cash deposits were stored. Her fingerprints are on the safe. And most damning, $2,300 in cash was found in her apartment during the search." Simone's breath caught. "That was my savings. I've been saving for 3 years to—" "Mrs. Williams, you'll have your chance to speak." Jefferson's tone suggested he had no intention of actually listening. Maya watched her mother's shoulders slump, watched the light dim in her eyes, and felt something break inside her chest. She'd seen this before. Teachers who assumed she'd cheated because her test scores were unusually high for someone from her neighborhood. Store clerks who followed them around, waiting for them to steal. Police officers who pulled over her mother for driving while black in a nice car, even though it was 15 years old and barely ran. But this was different. This was a courtroom. Wasn't justice supposed to be blind? "Mr. Moss, your defense?" Jefferson asked without enthusiasm. Gerald Moss stood reluctantly, like a student called on when he hadn't done the homework. "Your Honor, my client has no prior record. She's a single mother working 2 jobs to support her daughter. The cash found in her apartment has a legitimate explanation." "Which is?" Moss shuffled through papers, searching for something he'd never bothered to write down. She saved it from her paychecks over several years." "Convenient." Carmichael smirked. "Except Mrs. Williams's bank statements show no regular deposits consistent with someone allegedly saving money. In fact, her account has been overdrawn 14 times in the past year." "Because I was putting cash aside." Simone stood abruptly, her voice rising with desperation. "The bank charges fees every time I deposit. I couldn't afford to lose $20 every time I wanted to save 50. The courtroom went silent. Even Jefferson seemed momentarily taken aback by the raw honesty in her voice, the kind of poverty so deep that saving money cost money, that being poor was its own kind of crime. Then he recovered his composure, his face hardening. "Mrs. Williams, control yourself, or I'll hold you in contempt." "Your Honor, if I may—" Moss tried weakly. "You may not." Jefferson leaned forward, and Maya saw something in his expression that made her blood run cold. Not just indifference, not just boredom. Something darker, something personal. Mrs. Williams, I've seen cases like yours 100 times. Single mothers, always with some excuse about saving for their children's future, about trying to get ahead. He paused, and his next words dropped like stones into still water. People from your background always seem to think the rules don't apply to them, that society owes them something. The air in the courtroom shifted. Several people in the gallery stirred uncomfortably. Carmichael's satisfied smile faltered slightly. Even he hadn't expected Jefferson to be quite so obvious. "Your Honor, that's—" Moss started, but his objection died before it fully formed. Objecting to a judge's racism was career suicide, and they both knew it. Simone stood frozen, her face a mask of forced composure, while tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. She'd known the system was rigged. She'd known the moment the police showed up at her apartment with a warrant based on anonymous tips that somehow knew exactly where to look. She'd known when they assigned her a public defender who barely learned her name. But hearing it spoken out loud, that casual confirmation that her skin color had already decided her guilt, that broke something fundamental inside her. "Mom," Maya whispered from the gallery, her voice small and terrified. Simone turned, meeting her daughter's eyes across the courtroom. In that moment, she made a decision. She could break down, give them the satisfaction of seeing her destroyed. Or she could stand tall, show her daughter that dignity couldn't be taken, only surrendered. She straightened her spine and looked directly at Judge Jefferson. "Your Honor, I didn't take that money, and someday the truth will come out. Maybe not today, maybe not for years, but it will come out, and people will know what happened in this courtroom." Jefferson's jaw clenched. "Is that a threat, Mrs. Williams?" "It's a promise, Your Honor. Truth has a way of surviving. Then let's see how well truth survives an 8-year prison sentence." Jefferson picked up his gavel. "Mrs. Williams, I find you guilty of grand larceny. Given your complete lack of remorse and your threatening statements to this court, I'm sentencing you to 8 years in Riverside Women's Correctional Facility with possibility of parole after 5. The gavel fell. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot, and Maya Williams felt her entire world collapse. "No!" She jumped from her seat, trying to run to her mother, but the bailiff caught her. "Mom, no, she didn't do it. Please." Simone was already being handcuffed, but she twisted to look at her daughter one last time. "Maya, listen to me. You're going to be okay. Mrs. Patterson will take care of you until—" "I don't want Mrs. Patterson. I want you." Maya was sobbing now, fighting against the bailiff's gentle restraint. "Baby, listen." Simone's voice broke, but she forced herself to keep talking. "You're smart. Smarter than anyone I've ever known. You're going to finish school, go to college, become everything I couldn't be. You hear me? Mom, please. Promise me, Maya. Promise me you won't let this break you." The bailiff was pulling Simone toward the side door now, the door that led to the holding cells, to the van that would take her to prison, to 8 years of her daughter's life that she'd never get back. "I promise," Maya screamed through her tears. "I promise, Mom. I'll make you proud. I'll fix this. I swear I'll fix this." As Simone disappeared through the door, Judge Marcus Jefferson gathered his papers with the satisfied air of someone who'd just completed a mundane task. He didn't look at the crying child in his courtroom, didn't acknowledge the social worker who'd appeared to take custody of Maya, didn't seem to notice or care that he'd just shattered 2 lives based on fabricated evidence and centuries-old prejudice. "Next case," he called, as if nothing significant had happened. But in the gallery, as Mrs. Patterson wrapped her arms around a sobbing 12-year-old girl, Maya Williams stopped crying. Her tears dried on her cheeks, replaced by something harder, colder. She stared at Judge Jefferson with an expression that didn't belong on a child's face. Pure, crystallized determination mixed with something that looked almost like calculation. She didn't know how yet, didn't know when. But as she was led out of that courtroom, Maya Williams made herself a promise that went deeper than the one she'd made to her mother. Someday, she would walk back into a courtroom, and Judge Marcus Jefferson would finally understand what justice actually meant. The fluorescent lights continued humming their indifferent song as the wheels of injustice rolled on, crushing another black family beneath them. But what Marcus Jefferson didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine as he moved on to his next case, was that he'd just created his own reckoning, and it was already counting down. 10 years, 4 months, and 17 days after Judge Marcus Jefferson's gavel fell, Maya Williams sat in a lecture hall at Harvard Law School, her pen moving across her notebook with the kind of focused intensity that made other students uncomfortable. Professor Diane Chen was mid-lecture on prosecutorial ethics, but Maya wasn't just taking notes. She was memorizing, cataloging, building an arsenal of legal knowledge that she'd been accumulating since the day her mother was taken from her. The prosecutor's duty, Professor Chen emphasized, tapping the podium, isn't to win cases. It's to seek justice. Can anyone tell me what happens when that principle is forgotten? Maya's hand shot up before anyone else's. It always did. Miss Williams? Innocent people go to prison, Professor. The system becomes a weapon instead of a shield, and those with power use it to destroy those without it. Her voice was calm, measured, but everyone in the room could feel the conviction behind it. Professor Chen smiled slightly. Eloquent as always. Though I sense there's a personal element to your answer. There's a personal element to everything about the law, Professor. We just pretend there isn't because it makes us feel more objective. Maya closed her notebook. But every law was written by someone with biases. Every verdict is delivered by a human with prejudices. Pretending otherwise doesn't make the system fair. It just makes the unfairness invisible. After class, as students filed out discussing weekend plans and internship applications, Maya packed her materials with methodical precision. Everything in her life was methodical now, organized, strategic. Maya, wait up! The voice belonged to Derek Foster, one of the few students who'd bothered to see past Maya's protective walls. He jogged to catch up, his expensive sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. A bunch of us are going to Grendel's Den if you want to join. Actually have fun for once. Can't. I have work. Maya shouldered her bag, already calculating the walk time to her evening job. You always have work. You're going to graduate with the highest GPA in our class, you're on law review, and you work 3 jobs. When do you sleep? When I'm dead. Maya said it like a joke, but Derek knew her well enough to hear the truth underneath. That thing you mentioned in class, Derek said carefully as they walked, about innocent people going to prison. That's about your mom, isn't it? Maya stopped walking. For a moment, Derek thought he'd crossed a line she'd never let him cross. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. My mother got 8 years for a crime she didn't commit. The prosecutor fabricated evidence. The judge was racist enough to make it obvious, but smart enough to keep it just subtle enough that no one cared. And her public defender was too overworked or too cowardly to fight back. She looked at Derek, and he saw something in her eyes that made him take a step back. She served 6 years before parole, got out when I was 18. By then I was already at Harvard on a full scholarship. But Derek, those 6 years destroyed her. Prison broke something inside her that'll never heal. Jesus, Maya, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be better. She started walking again, faster now. Be the kind of lawyer who actually gives a damn about justice instead of billable hours and partnership tracks. What Derek didn't know, what nobody at Harvard knew except Maya herself, was that every single decision she'd made for the past 10 years had been calculated toward one specific goal. The internships she'd chosen, the professors she'd studied under, the areas of law she'd specialized in, prosecutorial misconduct, judicial ethics, criminal justice reform, and most importantly, the district attorney's office in her hometown, the same office that had destroyed her mother. That evening, Maya took the subway to her 3rd job of the week. Legal assistant at a small firm that specialized in wrongful conviction cases. The pay was terrible, but the experience was priceless. She'd spent hundreds of hours reviewing case files, learning to spot the patterns of corruption, understanding how the system protected its own. Maya, you're here late. Arthur Rosen, the senior partner, emerged from his office with reading glasses perched on his nose. At 72, he'd spent 40 years fighting losing battles against a system designed to never admit mistakes. Reviewing the Morrison case. I think I found something. Maya pulled up the file on her computer. The detective who testified about the evidence chain? He was fired 3 years later for planting evidence in another case. If we can prove a pattern, we can file for post-conviction relief. Arthur leaned over her shoulder, studying the screen. How did you find this? Cross-referenced every detective who testified in wrongful conviction cases in the past 15 years against disciplinary records. Maya scrolled through her spreadsheet. 47 detectives had serious misconduct allegations. 11 were eventually fired or forced to resign, but they all testified in dozens of cases before that happened. Arthur stared at her. You built a database? I built 3 databases: prosecutors, judges, and detectives, all cross-referenced with known misconduct, overturned convictions, and civil rights violations. Maya pulled up another screen. Want to know something interesting? Judge Marcus Jefferson has a 43% higher conviction rate for black defendants than white defendants in similar cases. He's been overturned on appeal 7 times, all cases involving defendants of color, and in every single one, the appeals court cited troubling judicial bias. Why do I feel like this is more than academic research? Arthur asked quietly. Maya met his eyes. Because it is. Judge Jefferson sent my mother to prison 10 years ago on fabricated evidence. The prosecutor was David Carmichael, who's now the elected district attorney. And in 6 months, when I graduate, I'm going to work for that DA's office. I'm going to earn Carmichael's trust. And then I'm going to systematically expose every corrupt conviction his office has ever secured, starting with my mother's case and ending with him in a prison cell. The silence that followed was profound. Arthur slowly sat down in the chair next to her, processing what she'd just revealed. Maya, he said finally, what you're describing isn't just revenge. It's career suicide. If they find out why you're really there, they won't. I've spent 10 years preparing for this. I've built a perfect record, top of my class, impeccable references. I even wrote my law review article on improving prosecutor-police cooperation. They'll love it. By the time they realize what I'm actually doing, I'll have enough evidence to bring down not just Carmichael and Jefferson, but the entire corrupt system they represent. And if you fail, I won't fail. My mother lost 6 years of her life, her career, her home, her dignity, everything. I've already lost 10 years to this mission. Failure isn't an option. Arthur studied the young woman before him, seeing not just brilliance and determination, but something else. Something that worried him. Maya, revenge and justice aren't the same thing. I know. Maya's smile was cold. That's why I'm going to deliver both. 6 months later, Maya Williams graduated Harvard Law School second in her class. She deliberately let someone else have valedictorian to avoid drawing too much attention. At the graduation ceremony, her mother sat in the audience wearing a dress Maya had bought her, trying to look proud while fighting the tremors in her hands that had started in prison and never stopped. Simone had aged 20 years and 6. Her hair had gone prematurely gray. Her eyes held a permanent wariness, the kind that came from being caged and watching other humans become monsters. She worked now as a night shift cleaner at a hospital, the only job that would hire someone with her record. The conviction had never been overturned, despite Arthur's best efforts. In the eyes of the law, she was still a thief. I'm so proud of you, baby, Simone whispered as they hugged after the ceremony, her voice breaking. Your father would have been so proud. Maya held her mother tighter, feeling how fragile she'd become. It's not over yet, Mama. This is just the beginning. What Simone didn't know, what Maya couldn't tell her yet, was that her daughter's Harvard education had never been about success or prestige or money. It had been about building the perfect weapon, and now that weapon was ready to strike. 2 weeks later, Maya walked into the district attorney's office for her first day of work. David Carmichael himself greeted her, older now, with gray at his temples and smile lines that made him look distinguished rather than duplicitous. "Miss Williams? Welcome to the team. Harvard Law Review. Stellar recommendations from Professor Chen. We're lucky to have you." He shook her hand warmly, genuinely pleased. "I understand you grew up in this city?" "Yes, sir." Born and raised, Maya's smile was perfect, eager, grateful, completely unthreatening. "Wonderful. We need more brilliant young people who understand the community they're serving. I'm assigning you to Judge Jefferson's courtroom initially. He can be demanding, but you'll learn more from him in 6 months than most lawyers learn in 6 years. Maya's heart hammered, but her expression never changed. "Judge Jefferson?" "I'd be honored, sir." As Carmichael walked away, Maya allowed herself one moment of truth. She stood in the hallway of the office that had destroyed her mother, about to work for the man who'd fabricated evidence against her, assigned to the courtroom of the judge who'd sentenced her to 8 years of hell. And for the first time in 10 years, Maya Williams smiled a real smile. Not of happiness, of anticipation. The hunt had finally begun. 18 months into her position at the DA's office, Maya Williams had become exactly what she needed to be, invisible in her excellence. She won cases efficiently, never made waves, and earned a reputation as David Carmichael's most reliable young prosecutor. She worked late, volunteered for difficult assignments, and most importantly, she made Judge Marcus Jefferson look good. Jefferson had aged in the decade since he'd sentenced her mother. His hair had gone completely white, his jowls had deepened, but his arrogance remained untouched. He still ruled his courtroom like a fiefdom, still delivered justice with the selective mercy of a king choosing which peasants deserved favor. And he had absolutely no idea who Maya really was. "Miss Williams," Jefferson called after a routine hearing one afternoon. "A moment?" Maya approached the bench with her case files, professional and deferential. "Yes, Your Honor." "That plea deal you negotiated on the Henderson case, smart work. You recognize the evidence had problems. That's the kind of prosecutorial discretion we need more of." He actually smiled at her. "Carmichael's lucky to have you." "Thank you, Your Honor." "I just try to serve justice." The irony of those words was not lost on Maya. What Jefferson didn't know was that Maya had been serving justice, just not the kind he understood. Over 18 months, she'd quietly reviewed every case file that crossed her desk, built connections with defense attorneys, and gained access to sealed records that revealed patterns of misconduct stretching back 15 years. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was explosive. That evening, Maya sat in Arthur Rosen's office with a banker's box full of documents. The old lawyer had become her mentor and the only person who knew what she was really doing. "I have everything," Maya said quietly, spreading files across his desk. 43 cases where Jefferson showed clear racial bias, 27 cases where Carmichael's office withheld exculpatory evidence, and all of it connects back to a systematic pattern of targeting black defendants to boost conviction rates. Arthur picked up one file, then another, his face growing paler. "My God, Maya. This could bring down half the criminal justice system in this city." "That's the idea." Maya pulled out one specific file, worn, handled 100 times. And here's where it started. My mother's case. The anonymous tip that led to her arrest came from a police informant paid $500. The cash they claimed she stole was never actually missing. The company admitted the accounting error 2 weeks after her arrest, but the DA's office told them not to come forward. They knew she was innocent? They knew. And they prosecuted anyway because Carmichael was running for DA that year and needed convictions. My mother was convenient, single, black, poor. Oh, no resources to fight back. Maya's voice hardened. This isn't bias, Arthur. It's systematic destruction of black lives for political gain. What's your plan? Tomorrow, the state attorney general announces an investigation into judicial misconduct. I've fed them everything anonymously over 6 months. They'll issue subpoenas by the end of the week. Maya closed the files carefully. The real play happens when Jefferson and Carmichael realize who I am. They'll destroy you. They'll try. But the evidence has been copied to the State Bar, the FBI, 3 newspapers, and the Innocence Project. The moment they move against me, everything goes public. The next morning, Maya walked into Judge Jefferson's courtroom for her last case before him. But this time, she wasn't prosecuting a defendant. She was delivering a subpoena. "Your Honor," Maya began, her voice steady, "the State Attorney General's office has asked me to deliver this personally." Jefferson frowned, taking the document. As he read, his face transformed from confusion to shock to rage. "The Attorney General is investigating me for judicial misconduct?" "Yes, Your Honor, based on evidence of systematic racial bias, improper sentencing, and conspiracy to deprive defendants of their constitutional rights." Maya's voice was clinical. "You're ordered to appear for deposition in 2 weeks." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Jefferson's face went purple. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Maya Williams, Your Honor." She let the name hang in the air. "Though 10 years ago, you knew me by a different name. I was the 12-year-old girl in your gallery the day you sentenced my mother, Simone Williams, to 8 years for a crime she didn't commit." The silence was absolute. Jefferson's face went from purple to white as memory crashed over him. The crying child, the defiant mother. "You," Jefferson could barely speak, "you infiltrated this office. I used my legal name, passed the bar, and served justice exactly as I was hired to do. Everything I've done has been within the bounds of the law, Your Honor, which is more than I can say for you." Maya pulled out another document. "This is my mother's exoneration motion. It will be filed this afternoon." David Carmichael burst into the courtroom, his face twisted with fury. "Maya!" "My office, now." "Actually, Mr. Carmichael, you'll want this." Maya handed him his own subpoena. "You're being investigated for prosecutorial misconduct and civil rights violations. The FBI will be executing search warrants on your office within the hour." 2 federal agents entered at that moment. "David Carmichael, Marcus Jefferson, we need you both to come with us." As they passed her in handcuffs, Jefferson hissed, "You've destroyed your career for revenge." Was it worth it? Maya met his eyes without flinching. "I didn't destroy my career, Your Honor. I fulfilled my oath to seek justice for all, and yes, it was worth every single moment of the past 10 years. 3 months later, Maya sat in federal court where Jefferson and Carmichael were being tried for racketeering, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. She'd given up her prosecutor position to serve as special counsel, specifically to try this case. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. On the count of conspiracy to deprive citizens of civil rights, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. The verdicts came one after another. Jefferson and Carmichael faced a combined 70 years in federal prison. But for Maya, the real victory came 2 weeks later, when her mother's conviction was formally vacated. Simone Williams stood before federal judge Patricia Morrison with tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Williams, on behalf of the justice system that failed you, I offer not just an apology, but a promise. Your daughter's courage has led to the review of over 400 cases. 12 people have been exonerated. The system broke you, but your daughter has begun fixing it." After the hearing, Simone grabbed Maya in the courthouse hallway. "You did it, baby. You actually did it." "We did it, Mama." Maya wiped her mother's tears. "You survived. That's what made all of this possible. What happens now?" "I've been offered positions at the Innocence Project, the ACLU, and as a federal prosecutor focused on public corruption, I'm going to spend the rest of my career doing exactly what I did to Jefferson and Carmichael, seeking justice for people the system forgot." 6 months later, Maya Williams testified before a Senate committee investigating criminal justice reform. Her story had become national news. "Miss Williams," the committee chair asked, "some critics say your methods were deceptive. How do you respond?" Maya looked directly into the cameras. "I responded by following every law, every ethical guideline, every rule. I did what the system is supposed to do. I sought truth over victory, and if that's controversial, then maybe we need to examine why truth-seeking is considered deceptive in our justice system." "But you must have felt vengeful." Every single day, Senator. But anger without strategy is just noise. I channeled my rage into education, into building an airtight case. Maya paused. My mother taught me that dignity can't be taken, only surrendered. Judge Jefferson tried to take hers. Instead, he gave me purpose. Now, 43 people have been exonerated, 2 corrupt officials are in prison, and the system is being forced to examine its failures. What would you say to other young people who've watched their families destroyed by the justice system? Maya thought about the 12-year-old girl screaming in a courtroom. I'd tell them what my mother told me: be smart, be patient, and never let the system convince you that injustice is inevitable. Change comes from refusing to participate in corruption and understanding that the long game, the strategic, unstoppable pursuit of justice, always wins in the end. Even if it takes 10 years? Maya smiled, thinking of her mother sitting in the gallery, free and vindicated. Especially if it takes 10 years, because some promises, the ones we make to the people we love in their darkest moments, are worth keeping, no matter the cost. Justice wasn't blind, she'd learned. It was deliberate, and now she was its instrument.